And good memory to press record there. Well done. So reminding everybody we're recording the session. We're going to talk about our two-wheeled friends on the road. So cyclists and motorcyclists. And I've got a presentation for each. And I know a lot of you are passionate cyclists, and I know that at least one of you is a passionate motorcyclist, and possibly more as well. So expecting some good input through the chat and the Q&A. I'll be asking you some questions. And at the end of this session, I'm going to give you your briefing, your audit briefing, because your next thing is to get out there and do a road safety audit, or a sort of trimmed down version of one, we'll call it. Now, I've had a look at how you went with the desktop exercise, and really impressed. Most of you have got it. You could see how an audit finding is written up, and you're obviously placing the words in there, and there's a little bit of reading comprehension as well as a little bit of understanding of the audit issue. And then you were doing well in, working out how the risk rating presents itself through the table, and then coming up with the safe system energy. So well done. Thank you for getting involved in that. That's going to help you out a heap when you get into actually doing the audit. So without further ado, I'm going to start off with cyclists, and we're going to jump into it. But do put your questions or comments in, and Emma's going to feed those to me as we tick along. Right, so by the end of this module, we're looking for you to have some good ideas on the requirements of cyclists for safe travel, or the requirements of people who ride bikes, which is what some of the cycling lobby groups are requesting we refer to cyclists as. So people who ride bikes, to humanize bike riders. So sources of technical information regarding cycle paths, shared paths, and cycling facilities. Identify common road safety audit issues for cyclists, and understand basic cycling facility terminology. So we're going to jump into it. There's sort of some key requirements or things that make cycling safer, and there's separation, clear sight lines, space to ride, smooth surface or consistent, surface. Speed maintenance, which is an interesting one. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. Connectivity and information. So as a road safety auditor, though, you need to start to try to think like a cyclist. We do like you to think like each of the road users. And a lot of road safety auditors are car drivers. A lot of road safety auditors are pedestrians. In fact, all road safety auditors I've ever met are pedestrians. Quite a few are cyclists, and a very small few are motorcyclists. So most auditors can sort of put themselves in the saddle of a push bike at least, and get that idea of what it's like and where some of the dangers present themselves. And then so you can, as we did with that pedestrian example, where you picked the spot where the crashes were happening. And I told you, you sort of like to imagine yourself walking each of the legs or driving each of the legs. Same as a cyclist. You imagine yourself riding along. You're riding along, you want to go straight through. Okay, now I'm riding along, I want to go right, or I want to go left. How do I do that? Is it safe? Where are the cars coming from? Where are my sight lines blocked? Am I close to doors? So you're just constantly asking yourself questions and imagining yourself going through those motions. The other thing, though, is to, I suppose, think like try to, put yourselves in the shoes of an 8-year-old or an 80-year-old. That's a sort of international design philosophy that's been termed 8 to 80. So if you could design a cycle facility for an 8-year-old and an 80-year-old, you've pretty much designed it for everybody else. Now, with cyclists, yeah, may not be actually true. If you design it nicely for an 8-year-old and an 80-year-old, it's going to work for commuter cyclists probably, or people who are going for a nice casual ride. But your lycra-clad training cyclists, or your mammals, your middle-aged men in lycra, and I probably have to put my hand up and say I'm a mammal these days. I when I'm out on my bike a lot of the time, I'm in the lycra and riding for a bit of fitness. I do commute as well, but the idea of some of these cycling facilities that have been constructed with probably that 8 to 80-year-old in mind are probably not the ones that I'm going to be using as doing my recreational cycling, because there's dogs, and there's it's a shared path, there are dogs, and then there's slow people, and then there's groups of people walking, and I've got a road next to it that I can be going on uninhibited. Now that creates us challenges as auditors, doesn't it? Because we've got to think, oh, okay, we're creating that, and there's some cyclists maybe out there, and so how do we factor all of this in? And it's not easy, and it's challenging, but what we can do is sort of provide that advice and help our clients along the way. In the cycling infrastructure space, there is a real wealth of documentation and things for you to look at. Not so much in some of the other road user classes like pedestrians and motorcyclists, but certainly cyclists there are. And we've got information in both of the Austroads Guide to Road Safety Part 6, the road safety audit ones, that have information and questions about cyclists. Don't forget to count your wallies. There is this document called the Shared Path Audit Guidelines, and if you're doing an audit of a shared path, or you're asked to do an audit of a shared path, I suggest you grab that document and you have a look at it and you work through that one. The Austroads Guide to Road Design Part 6A is paths for walking and cycling, and that's a really good document, and it gives you all that info that you're probably looking for a lot of the time about what are the widths you need for paths, and what are the slopes and the grades and different crossing facilities, and how big do they need to be, and all those sorts of things. Austroads also created this document, Cycling Aspects of the Austroads Guides, where they collected together all these different bits from all these reports around cycling and plonk them all into the one document. So another good resource. And of course, there's our Australian Standard 1742. Part 9 is the bicycle facilities part, which is more around the use of the standard signage and specific requirements in accordance with the Australian Standard. So there's some really critical documents to be aware of. Now, remember though, auditing isn't about blindly following these and checking against these. You're going to common sense look at these facilities for safety implications, but you would be expected to be also referring to these and seeing if things check and are they bringing up issues. Because you might go, well, this path, this path looks okay, but I haven't seen it when it's for lots of people or less people or different conditions. I wonder what the guidelines or the standards are telling us the width of this path should be. So that might help you out as an auditor. Also, if you go, well, this looks narrow, and you go to you go, okay, the guide says it should be minimum 1.5 meters, and you measure it out, and you go, well, it's only 1.2. So your concern is validated with a standard. So you can put that in your report. You can say the auditors are concerned by the width of the path and blah, blah, blah. And, the Austroads Guide Part 6A says a minimum width should be 1.5. But likewise, if you go, oh, this looks really narrow to me, and you go to the Austroads Guide that says the minimum path width should be 1 meter, and you go, it's 1.2, doesn't mean you don't necessarily put it in your report. You just might put it in. You might say the auditors are concerned for these reasons and the high volumes and this and that. And then you can just say, it is noted that the Austroads Guide, this meets the minimum required to the Austroads Guide. However, the auditors are still concerned about it. Absolutely valid. Then there's just a raft of supplementary documentation. And, some of my colleagues wrote these 3 for the Victorian government. So bicycles and pedestrian treatments at roundabouts, car dooring areas, strategic cycling corridors. This is a nice new document, bicycle lane design guide from the City of Melbourne. The New South Wales government's popped out their bicycle lane design guide, which is pretty cool. It's got some nice artistic images in there, so that's worth a read as well. We've got the Crow Manual, which is like the international Bible of cycling infrastructure, and prize for the person who can tell me which country the Crow Manual is from. First one to pop that in. Ooh. Duncan has got it again with the Netherlands. So get in quick, people. Otherwise, Duncan's going to snap up all the prizes. But yes, it's the Dutch cycling design manual, and the Dutch are they love a bike. The Dutch, and then you've got like different guides that we sort of put in there. We've put a heap of these into your memory stick and on Schoology. So if you're interested in really delving into the depths of that, get into it. We run some more in-depth training on cycling infrastructure, but this is what we're giving you today gets you a good idea for your audits. All right. Common road safety audit finding number 1 for bikes is longitudinal grates. Now, I say number 1, it's the first one that I'm going to talk about because it's so vivid and it's so clear and it's so obvious. But unless you're looking and thinking of it, you don't notice it. And this has been one where I've done expert witness for a number of legal cases involving bike riders who have fallen into longitudinal grates and injured themselves. And it really doesn't bode well for the managing road authority if you have longitudinal grates, unless maybe it's a motorway or something where you actually have absolutely restricted cyclists. But it's such a well-known common issue, and you'd be expected to identify it and remove those from the road network. Yeah, so each of those has been successful. There's cases for the parties that have gone into the grade, and in my expert witness in question, I basically say, well, I run the road safety audit course and have been doing it for many years, and the first common audit issue I talk about for cyclists are longitudinal grates. It's 101, and so that's. So hopefully you'll remember it, and hopefully now when you're out there looking on the road network or riding your bike, you'll be very aware of longitudinal grates. Small ones or even big ones like this, which will swallow up your tyre, no doubt. Another common road safety audit finding, which is an interesting finding, but this is one where we're doing an audit. My team and I were doing an audit of some upgrades to this road, Sydney Road. So they were planning to do lots of green bike markings, some threshold treatments, some bike boxes. So bike storage box basically is where you have the lane and then the bikes can sort of mingle out here to get in front, to store, and then off they go again. And this is a signalised intersection of Blythe Street and when there's a green light here, there's cars turn out there, but there's also this left in green arrow. And they're proposing a bike box in front of that one, which is just got the potential that cyclists come down, they store in front, and then we've got the green left arrow, but the cyclists are wanting to go forward. And we've just got this issue and this conflict happening there. Now, as an auditor, that one becomes really hard actually to risk rate. Well, I find it quite hard to risk rate because I go, yeah, is it, you know, is it really going to be this crash, or is it going to be a road rage incident, or what's going to happen? And in the end, I sort of put it down to a lowish risk level. Luckily, these things get rectified pretty easily and pretty quickly on a design like this. But it's hard. It's hard to sort of conjure up a scenario where that bike's sitting squarely out in the middle of the lane, but somebody decides or misses them and goes for their turn. So, risk rated appropriate. I genuinely reckon if they'd marked it like that, we wouldn't have had any deaths or serious injuries of cyclists because of that box over sort of a 5-year period. But it's certainly, some minor incidents maybe, and certainly some road rage and beeping and all of that sort of stuff. Emma, how about you pop up a quiz there if you possibly can?
Absolutely, yeah. There we go.
Here it is. So just a couple of questions. Oh, actually, you're not going to have the answer for the second one, but we'll have a chat about it anyway. I think I've jumped the gun on the poll. It's all right. It's all good fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'll give you a second. And remember, you're not marked on this. This is just to keep you thinking and keep seeing if you are listening. This also helps me work out how much background experience the group has with cycling infrastructure. So this is really worked out quite well. Lots of people putting their vote in. Now, if it hasn't popped up on your screen for some reason, I'll read it out to you. Which of the following is not a common cyclist requirement in infrastructure? Separation, connectivity, cadence, or clear sight lines? What is the name for a shared space arrow? A chevron, a sharrow, a sparrow, or a marrow? Nearly got everybody who's clicked the button. And one more to go. We got it all. You beauty. All right, you can end that one, Emma, and display the results.
There we go.
Thank you very much. Which of the following is not a common cyclist requirement? So that was one of the first slides I showed. And cadence is not, although I did try to fool you because it is a cycling term. It's how fast you pedal is your cadence. But not a sort of road safety infrastructure requirement thing. And a shared space arrow, which I haven't shown you yet, is called a sharrow, as many of you got there. Chevron, it sort of has a chevron in it, and a sparrow is a bird, and marrow is, I don't know, some gooey stuff in your bones, I think. Right. Let's stop sharing that. Thank you. And let's actually continue on the interaction. I'm going to pop up a little scenario, and I want you to all put your road safety auditor hats on and do a bit of an existing conditions cycling path, shared path audit from this one. First of all, though, I'll give you I'll give somebody a prize who can tell me what country this is, and then I'll pause to see if anybody can tell me that, because that's a bit of fun. And then I'm going to give a prize out for a couple of issues that I'd like you as auditors to pick up if you were asked to audit this facility. Okay.
So we've got a few answers there, Ken. So Shana said the UK.
Yeah. Sorry, I'll jump my slides forward. I need a bit more, detail than that. Okay.
She doesn't know which part though.
Sam's
said Wales.
got it. Sam is,
well done.
is the winner. So it's Wales, and
Wales.
my Welsh is pretty good, and I'll tell you that translates there to cyclist dismount. I'm pretty sure. Somebody's well, funnily enough, somebody said New Zealand. A lot of the time when I'm doing different work in New Zealand, I go, this looks a lot like the UK. But anyway, okay. Sam's got an advantage from the UK. So, well, still get a prize.
Yes, use your advantages where you can.
That's right, absolutely. Okay, now what I want you to do is have a look at this, and I want you to write some issues in that you might identify in your road safety audit when you've been asked to do a road safety audit of this cycling facility. And there's a couple that I'm interested in that I'll give a prize for the person who pops that one in as well. But there's only a few of them. So off you go, take your time, look at it. Now, I think if you can move your screen around so it gets bigger on your screen by sliding different things. But let's go. Yeah, and just type them in as you go. I'll monitor that. I'm having a look at the moment. We're getting a few ideas coming in, which is good.
Coming in thick and fast.
Yeah, no, they're good. I'm watching them roll in, and we've got some keen eyes, which is good. All right, I'll give you another 20 seconds. But we've certainly got a couple that I wanted people to be picking up, which is good. Okay, I better go back up to a little bit earlier. Okay, so here we go. Let's give Lily a prize for sightlines between cyclists and ped/vehicles. So that's the fence blocking the sightlines there. And that's a very good pickup. And then lots of people came up with that one. And then let's go Chris for the grated pit, and it did come in thick and fast as well. A lot of people picked that up. So I just told you about that one in detail. So I'm glad to see everybody was picking it up. It's a good direction for if you're riding that along the road, but right in the bike path, it's the wrong direction. Now, I should have mentioned there are cycle-friendly grates which can be navigated from any direction. They sort of have a waviness to them, or there's different ones. So there's plenty of options available to us out there that could easily fit that. So that's an option for rectification of that issue. This one, what do we think? I'll pause before I sort of come in on. So we've got a sight distance issue. What can we do about that? But I'm going to keep moving down here. Great. So somebody's pointing out it's hard to see the signage. So someone said the dog or no dog signage, which I'm not sure. I reckon they might maybe mean this one, which is actually saying pedestrians on one side and cyclists on the other. And I think that's actually a pedestrian holding a little pedestrian's hand, not a dog, but I'm not 100% sure. It's very distant there. But yes, so we've got small signs. The tactile, some people have pointed out. So this is an interesting one where we've got the tactile ground surface indicators, the TGSIs, which are there to, meet the PDA requirements. But I think some people are rightly pointing out that they're a potential slip hazard or destabilize a rider. So that can be factored into your thinking. So well done there. Let's give Karen a prize for that as well. I think that's an interesting point to pick out. That's an aside. I think it's kind of interesting that each sign has its own little light. That's pretty cool, isn't it? Anyway, that's not a road safety audit issue. I think it's an interesting one. As a road safety auditor, you'd be back there at night and you'd be able to see how effective all of that is in terms of being able to see those signs. But certainly on a cycle path, you don't get the retroreflectivity benefits of signs because cyclist headlights aren't usually anywhere near as good. So it does make sense to light those a little bit. Did somebody have any ideas for our sight distance impediment, how we could maybe improve that one?
Responses?
Yep, good. Okay, so we've got a lot of people who want a convex mirror. That's an interesting choice. I'll talk about them in a second. We do have some people who want to just taper the fence, so as in cut that down there. So that's a pretty easy one there. Some good ideas have come in. Okay, some people looking to move the bike path away from the property boundary to open up those sight lines. Switch the cyclists and the peds, so the cyclists are further away there. So they've got, opening up sight lines. These are all good ideas. Grade separate the shared use path from Chris. I like it. We didn't put any budget limitations on you, did we? So that's a good one. That's well done. The other option, I suppose you'd probably want to do in combination with some of these sightline opening up would be to, raise this and give priority to the bike path through here. And so having all the cars having to stop and slow down with that. Now, you'd still have a sightline issue, and it'd sort of alter it a little bit. But I do always encourage that continuation in that sense. Yeah, so Duncan's on board with the grade separation, the overpass. He wants that as well, or maybe a big Hoven ring. For those who know what they've done in the Netherlands, it's like the world's biggest cycling elevated roundabout structure thing. It's awesome. Yep, some warning signs for cars as well to be aware of this. So we're thinking about not just the cyclists, but also thinking about the others. So that's some pretty wonderful stuff, and I think this group's quite enlightened on some of the things. Certainly back there would have been there would have been a lot of people in the past who would have wanted to do things like the fencing here, and then that fence there that sort of goes back behind there. That forces the cyclist to have to go in and around and then this way and that way to slow them down and the like. And that's generally been discouraged. The latest cycling design guidance is discouraging that sort of treatment for some other challenges and problems it can face. And the other one, that is always a fallback is just, I'll tell the cyclist to dismount. Now that one's already there. And so somebody back in the days probably identified this and gone, oh, okay. Well, let's tell the cyclist to dismount, and then walked away. Sort of like, the traffic engineer is going, yeah, no, it's on them if they don't dismount. And then we see the height of ridiculousness of that sort of thinking, really, with this sort of stuff. Cyclists are not going to dismount, right? Speed maintenance is something that they will create for themselves. And so we don't want to be seeing that. So be realistic. Just because the legal ramifications say that, cyclists have to dismount. So an auditor is saying it as it's actually going to happen, not what if everybody followed the rules absolutely. And if you cannot reasonably think a cyclist's going to stop and dismount at each one of these, walk across, get back on, ride 5 meters, get on. Craziness. So here's an audit colleague and I were doing of a new cycling shared path, or a shared path that was being put at property boundary in a big new subdivision. And you can see there it's that issue of the high fence, and particularly where the garages are right up against the high fence. And so we're going to have cyclists coming down here, we're going to have cars backing out. And so then, some suggestions of dropping that down. And, if we'd been, so we did sort of at some points make some suggestions that the shared path would have been better further away, but it was built and it was down to sort of modifications in there. So in their opinions, safe system energy though within this one had sort of within tolerable. Now it's borderline, but a cyclist and then a car backs out, a cyclist hits the car, or that initial impact's likely to be fairly survivable in terms of our energy tolerance levels. Under that 30 kilometre per hour, most likely. So the other thing to think about, so surface issues for cyclists, obviously not going to be good, but also can alter cyclists' riding line. So they may go into dangerous areas to avoid some surface issues. Certainly we know of lots of areas out there where there's a shoulder, but the shoulder's very poor in terms of potholes and tree roots and these sorts of things. And so the cyclists are on the through lane. So while the facility's there, it means they're not using it. So I'll go back before I do that. So this is a sort of common scenario, interestingly, and it's where lanes don't line up, right? So you've got the straight through lane here, you've got a straight through lane here, and as you can see, this one lines up there. This one lines up there, doesn't it? Now you've probably been, driven in these, and you're sort of half concentrating, and you go, "Oh no, it's not my lane," and you jump into the next. And we know that when we don't get that lane alignment, we get these side swiping crashes between passenger vehicles, between cars, and the like. Challenge we've got is when you add the cyclist who's coming through here and they're trying to get in there, they're the ones that often get the more severe injury. So if you're, auditing a design of a new intersection or alterations to an intersection, you want to try and get that lane lining up. Then used to see back in the day, the designers would be looking down a plan like that to see how all your lanes line up and the geometry of the road. You sort of look down a plan. Now you can just draw, straight lines on the electronic drawings and things. But you do see these popping up quite a bit again with new subdivisions linking in with other roads, and they've got constraints or they don't own the land, so they've altered it. They've moved things around to try to fit with what they can afford, and you see some interesting stuff. Also, that point of it's a squeeze point essentially. So as a cyclist comes up here, but the car that is accelerating out of here is really trying to merge, and so we've got quite a bit of conflict there. So there are ability to sort of have cyclists off the road for a bit or behind or a few other possible treatments. But again, as an auditor, you can just be pointing out this. May end up that it's cyclist head start. It could be some warning signs, could be green markings to warn of different things. So the old Austroads design guidance used to be on a one-lane roundabout in a local street that you get the cyclist as far away as possible from traffic on the approach and in the roundabout. That's changed. That's changed now to actually say, if you're in a low-speed environment and you're not going to provide separated facilities, you actually encourage the cyclist or the people who ride bike to claim the lane and to get into the middle and take the roundabout. And that is a sharrow, as many of you rightly pointed out, a shared arrow. It's saying that bit of road space is where people who ride bikes and vehicles share the lane. Now, this one is an interesting one. Perfectly fine for, very confident cyclists. Kind of don't think you'd be encouraging your 8-year-old to claim the lane, would you? So I think where we go to with the facilities that separate and provide a separated facility are a much better thing. And I think I've got a photo of one of those. 2-lane roundabouts are an extremely challenging thing for getting cyclists through them. In the Netherlands, for example, they will grade separate. They will have an underpass for cyclists or elevate the roundabout and keep this. They aren't going to be putting a cyclist through a 2-lane roundabout for sure. Unfortunately, we have a lot of these and we have a lot of this interaction. But there's people coming up with some decent ideas for this sort of stuff. This idea of separating, as I mentioned, seems to be working quite well. So you're taking the cyclists off the road and then giving them either priority crossing or really nice staged ability to cross at a point where they've got good sight lines. They're not trying to guess whether vehicles are turning or not. So that sort of thing could work pretty well. We haven't seen too many examples of that on these big 2-laners, but we do have examples of it on these 1-laners, which is Moray Street. This is the example, and this is a really wonderful sort of, there it is actually built, wonderful sort of facility, inspired by the Dutch protected roundabouts, and we know we're getting really great safety outcomes all around on this sort of stuff. So question, looks like there's a question come in there, Emma. Let me just try to catch up here.
Yes. Are private property owners accommodating to road safety audit findings?
Oh, good question. Yeah, so, well, they don't care. Usually a property owner's, not too caring about what audits say and the like. The road authority or the developer or whoever it is who's trying to build this facility that interacts with the road environment is the one that needs to work all of that out. So as a road safety auditor, we don't need to be too concerned. We say the issue, we say it as it is, and we put forward hopefully reasonable suggestions on how we can lessen the risk. Through it may involve, property acquisition, like taking part of people's land, but you probably want to provide some other options in there, because land acquisition can be a expensive, time-consuming exercise and can derail projects. So if we can think of ways to help them out a bit more. But property developers, if it's up to them, they won't do road safety audits. They don't want to pay for extra audits and any things that might come out of it. They're driven by one thing and one thing alone. It's selling their land and dividing it and developing it and making money. So it's up to the responsible road authority to mandate audits and ensure that the developers are producing something that is safe. And we don't want to hamper them in making a profit. That's fine, but we've got to make sure it's not at the cost of the health and safety of the community. Lots of little ideas on different roundabouts, and I suppose as an auditor, this one was quite interesting. So it's sort of separating with curb the cycle facility coming in, and then sort of staging it. A little bit of a pause there, and then this little what one of my designers termed the mammal pouch, where the cyclist can pause and then take that next bit and then go. You start to worry a little bit about things like the swept path of larger vehicles around here and their ability to see things. So again, just putting yourself in the shoes of the cyclist or on the bike. And that's another point. You may, as a road safety auditor, ride the route if you determine that might help. Well, there's a lot of cyclists, and we certainly do like to ride the route sometimes. And it can give you a really good feel from that. Obviously, if it's a design like this one, and you ride that down on the Surf Coast Highway, you're not going to pick up too much because the roundabout's not there. I mean, you might pick up other things. So it may not be as useful in this situation. But if it's an existing facility or a shared path, it's certainly worth that ride. Here's an interesting one out of just outside Traralgon, down in Victoria. And they're building a new roundabout, big, expensive roundabout, $4 and $5 million worth of works or the like. And they want to provide some facilities for cyclists. So they are building this elevated, separated cycle way, at least for the cyclist that's going straight through here. A bit more of a challenge if you're the cyclist turning right, but that's what it is. That's what it is. So this is on the Princess Highway East, and there are some cyclists in the shoulder, and so they're saying, well, we'll get them off. We'll provide that facility. So it all looks pretty good, and there it is built. Now, I just think that they've spent a lot of money to create this facility, but I'm not sure too many cyclists are going to understand that it's actually for them. I'm sure with other people's take on this, but okay. As a cyclist, I think some of them might go, oh, well, that's where that ends for me, and off I go, rather than and think that, oh, that looks like a footpath. Yeah, you got a little cyclist only sign, may help. But I think the application of a small little bit of green there would just tell the story beautifully. And it'd be no extra cost in the scheme of this project. Like, as I say, it's like a $4.5 million roundabout. So here's an example of where a little bit of that has been used to try to guide you down to the place you want to go. Need to put the drain under the path. So Duncan's sort of, I think, picking these parts out of it, which is good. But this is not the traditional use of green markings. Green markings on the pavement were for conflict points between cars and cyclists, and trying to identify that as a driver, you need to be aware a cyclist could be appearing at this point. So that's what it was a traditional use for. But now it's starting to be used as a little bit of a guide occasionally as to where cyclists could and should go. Doing well. Let's talk about strip shopping centres very quickly. Dooring. Dooring is the term for, yes, opening doors in front of cyclists, and we know it's a challenge. Certainly, on a road like Sydney Road, lots of dooring risk. Challenges we have are that during part of the day here, this is actually a running lane, the clearway you can see there. So you can't build these cycle facilities, and it's really even hard to mark this area for cyclists because during part of the day, that's the middle of the lane. Get easier if you've got permanent parking on the side to mark something at least. But really, the ones that seem to be performing the best are these physically separated lanes. Now, you're all attuned to this because you did your desktop little exercise that you've just finished on one of these, so you're seeing how they operate. But it's a pretty good facility. There's some challenges associated with sight lines of vehicles turning in. I like to make this sort of like a bluestone or something very much to slow a vehicle that's turning in. As a cyclist, to slow that vehicle so I don't make that fast move through. Green surface at the conflict points, as you can see. When shared paths cross roads, you can give priority to the shared path. Like our Welsh example earlier, we could have created this sort of facility, which continues priority for the shared path. That actually is a sign that's how the sign should look, and it's part of, at least for Victorian, there's a Vic Roads Road design note which specifies this setup. So you're essentially making the shared path the priority road through. You've created an intersection and you're giving priority to the shared path. And there's one photo of one Kathy took as she was driving around in passenger seat there. So everybody's looking out for them. But that's what you see as the cyclist. You get a nice, clean, uninterrupted run through. You can see there that the driver's giving way. Really important to raising these helps a huge amount. I like this little, it's a one-way squeeze point or one-way, one lane slow point where it's local area traffic management, but it's got cyclist bypass facilities. And that's really great in my opinion, because the majority of local area traffic management we try and squeeze cyclists in with cars because, you put a chicane in, you put a roundabout in, you put, you narrow down the road. It's usually that everybody gets squeezed together. And it's one of my particular gripes on my ride to work is this point where I get squeezed in the car. But it's the chicane's good because it's slowing vehicles down. But to provide that is a wonderful little sort of safety facility. Remember the shared path audit guidelines I mentioned, they're worth a look. And a shared path audit is really, it's sort of its own beast and in the cycling auditor space. And that's the sort of stuff I take out there. It's a little bit hard to see. I've got my Garmin camera there. I've got a electronic level, so I know the grades of different ramps or the path, and got a height measurer to check underpass heights and a few other things. But you're looking at the path width, obstacles, hazards, vertical alignment, surface conditions, and a whole lot of different things. When paths intersect, path-to-path intersections, the principles or the way you can think about it is actually pretty close to the way you think about a normal intersection. Clear priorities, good sight lines, advanced warning, sign guidance. Ideally 90 degrees. That's maybe a little bit different to how you would do a road intersection. but that makes it a lot clearer and potentially even speed reductions. So this one I'd say is a bit unclear as to who's got priority, and this is a bit of a location of risk. Another one here, which I've got the aerial of, so you've got one path sort of going like this, and you've got this other path coming down here. And it kind of looks like that one might have priority or that one. And if you're here and you're writing down here, it kind of looks, oh, is it my priority or is it this one? Probably think it's this one. It's actually this one because that's the main route through. It's just all a little bit confusing. So you want to clarify that. Obviously, drop-offs are issues. That's a big, clear, obvious drop-off. But smaller drop-offs, that's enough to destabilize a rider, have them into the drain there or the like. And even hazards sort of close to the edge of the bike path. You might think, oh, well, that's off the path. But, these paths, as I say, get used by people walking, kids, dogs running out, all sorts of things. So the idea that a rider may have to, avoid these things is very real. And so we have some guidance on sort of distances you would like clear, a bit like an old clear zone, really. And thinking about the path at night, so something like this looks good. I don't have the night photo, but there's no light around there. You won't see that at night, and so if you are going to have things like that, retroreflective, ideally lit, or ideally no hazards in those sorts of areas. Debris, gravel on path obviously can be an issue. And cyclist fencing, fencing for cyclists. So there's particularly designed fences that are designed to not snag a handlebar or a pedal. And this is not one of them. So this will likely snag any of that if a cyclist comes around there and drifts out a bit or a dog jumps out or the like. But these are the sort of look of a designed cycle fence, and your local jurisdiction's got good guidance on what's accepted. What else we got? The back of guardrail posts is a significant issue for cyclists. Again, another one where councils have been successfully sued by injured parties. They, all good intentions, putting the barrier in, trying to protect either the vehicles from hitting the trees or the path users from errant vehicles, but cyclists hitting the back of those posts, you can imagine the damage that could cause. So have a look for that sort of stuff as well. You can back-to-back your guardrail if you want. You can. There are post capping available. You put caps on top of them. So that's a pretty nice one. That is a cyclist-friendly fence and back-to-back there on your W-beam. Yeah, think about these obstructions in the path. Again, this one at night, very hard to see. In fact, so much so that whoever's put the chain there, I think somebody's tied that around it to warn other cyclists at night that there's a chain across their path. So it's again people coming at it from the view of, okay, I've got to stop vehicles getting into this area, and so they've done it like this, but we've got to think about the safety of other road users. So this is a pretty good setup, I reckon. Ideally the cable stay would have not been plonked into the middle of the path, and that would be your ideal order finding and recommendation to move cable stay outside path. So cable stay is just holding up a power pole. Here it is in the middle, but because it's there and they've said, okay, how do we do this? So they've warned, they've got some, buffered area. They've got flexible bollards. These are flexible bollards. They're retroreflective and it's, well delineated. So it's a decent retrofit. Ideally, we wouldn't have the issue, but yeah. So there are these things called thematic audits, which are cycling specific audit. And it's really basically you're going to ride the route and you're looking directly for issues for cyclists. and you do these a lot on shared paths facilities or new bike stuff. So what I've done is put a fact sheet in there that we've put together on, just some of the specifics associated with that might be a little bit different. I mean, you're generally following the same audit process. You're just doing it from on a bike and you're looking specifically through that lens. So have a flick through that if you want. It's on your USB and in Moodle. So questions on cyclists before I jump into our other two-wheeled friends.
Doesn't seem to be. Should we just take a little break, Ken? Just give everyone stretch their legs and.
I think that's a great idea, Emma.
Okay.
It's right on half time too.
Yeah.
So we'll get out the oranges and you can have
Perfect.
your halftime orange and stretch.
Oh, wait, we do have a question.
Yeah.
We will answer. Is there guidance on commuter cycle routes compared to recreational?
No, not really.
In terms of managing design speed on SUPs.
Oh yeah, okay, on shared use paths. So the not really, no, there's really not great guidance on that. I mean, I dare say that a shared use path as a training facility is not a great thing. And there has been some stuff on recreational cycling routes with things like active warning signs. So as a cyclist goes by, then a warning sign will activate for a certain period of time. So especially over a windy, hilly bit where, the real mammals like to get out there and do their training rides up the mountains. But of course, that's the area that there's no overtaking and it's tight lanes. And so it's, the drivers are coming around there quite, and then it's dark and it's probably, so we have done some some treatments where you've got, the cyclist goes by as the warning sign, advisory speeds and a whole lot of things. But in terms of a shared use path, no, there's not good guidance. It's really all about design around thinking of commuter cyclists probably at your maximum speeds, but not people who are really pushing it to get this massive, high energy training.
Great. And we've just got a comment, treatments to cross light rail. Yeah. I just thought yeah.
Treatments, yeah. So very interesting. And I did provide some advice to the New South Wales government on a fatality involving light rail in Newcastle and a cyclist who unfortunately was killed on that. But I mean, really simple design guidance is you don't have cyclists running parallel to light rail tracks, and if they have to cross them, you cross at a right angle. So you try to you design your paths in that way. So that's really simple sort of stuff. I can provide some further examples and things if somebody has a particular issue, but I know as we get more and more rail, because they're slippery and also cyclists get caught in. Melbourne cyclists are pretty good to that. We know that you don't want to get caught in that tram track, you'll be off quickly, but some others are maybe not so attuned to it, and it's also up to us to try and design to cater for that. Right, let's have that 2-minute break.
Yeah, perfect. We'll see you in 2 minutes.
Thanks. Good stuff. Now, I'm going to talk about another two-wheeled road user, occasionally a three-wheeled road user, but more likely a two-wheeled road user. And it's motorcyclists. Maybe we should start referring to them as people who ride motorcycles to try to cover that off the same way cyclists or people who ride bikes are wanting to be referred to as that. Now, we're lucky here in our group, we've got Duncan McRae, who is a very experienced rider and has been doing a lot of work with myself and my colleagues on being the sort of experienced rider in some of our thematic road safety audits. And so I may tap into your knowledge, Duncan, at some point, or certainly at the end if I have missed a few critical things. I want you to pop up your hand and we can unmute you and you can add a few or just keep typing them in as we go. But a little like cyclists, I want to identify some of the requirements for motorcyclists for safe travel, source some technical information, albeit that there's a lot less of that for motorcycle safety infrastructure, common audit findings, and some basic understanding of some of the terminology. So, now this is a TAC stat. Motorcyclists are 20 to 30 times more likely to be killed or seriously injured as compared to car drivers from trip A to trip B. And there are a big variety of reasons that is the case. And like anything in road safety, it's very complex and multifaceted. But why don't we just type in a few reasons why we think that might be the case. And actually, Duncan, just pop up your hand. I'm going to unmute you to talk very briefly about this because it's too good an opportunity to be missed, I reckon. You're just going to have to unmute yourself there, Duncan.
Done deal.
Yeah, we can hear you. So we're going to have lots of people probably writing stuff in, but why don't you talk us through some of the reasons why motorcyclists, compared to driving a car from A to B, 20 to 30 times more likely to be killed or seriously injured?
I think the obvious one is their vulnerability, which is exacerbated by the fact they can actually travel at speed. I mean, essentially they've got the same protection as a push bike rider or a person rides a push bike, but of course they're capable of going at the same speed as a car. So obviously they're hitting objects at a much, much higher velocity and of course way outside the realms of what the human body can stand. So obviously, yeah, when you're talking about those thresholds, it's quite possible for a motorcyclist, like the picture you've got there, that rider could go into that guardrail head first at 80 km an hour, and the chance of withstanding that's almost zero. The other issue, of course, is it's a balancing act. You've got a whole lot less traction. If you think about a car, these days you've got 4 contact patches, which are essentially, I suppose, the size of of your palm, your fist, your hand, whatever you want to think about it. Whereas motorcyclists have got 2 contact patches, literally the size of matchboxes. So the amount of rubber, the fact, of course, that they lean. So as soon as you actually go onto the side of the tyre, the whole geometry changes. So there's a whole range of things that exacerbates their crash potential. And of course, what we're seeing now is change in the mix as cars get safer with airbags and crumple zones. Of course, motorcyclists, none of that technology's come along in terms of protection. So the only thing they've got really is ABS and traction control and cornering ABS as a means to prevent crashes, nothing to actually protect in the event of a collision.
Yeah.
So that's a short answer.
Yeah, and you've done well. You've summed up a really great mix of issues there associated with the inherent challenges that motorcyclists face, and yeah. So thank you, Duncan. We may be coming back to you a little bit later on for some more input. But I suppose actually anybody else in the group, if you are a motorcycle rider, just write into the chat, and we're interested to know who else rides a bike. The thing is that we, motorcyclists are a registered, licensed road user, a legitimate road user, and thus we have a responsibility. We have a duty of care to provide the best facilities we possibly can. There's no getting around it. So, looks like John is a daily rider. So there we go, another experienced rider, and somebody who'll be an auditor and a rider, which is a very powerful combination to be able to see things from the rider's perspective and also the road safety auditor's perspective. But we have that duty of care. And I think often road authorities and engineers and practitioners forget that. Like, they're aware that motorcyclists are at risk, and but then that sort of link that we can do more to the road environment when we specifically think it's this very vulnerable, very high-risk road user, that we play a role in this. Too many people are jumping straight to that, hooning, super fast motorcyclists who we have those in car drivers, we have those with, all road user groups have that element as well, but we can do a huge amount. Now, there are these guides, and I was involved in the first one of these guides ever, Make Your Roads Motorcycle Friendly guide in Victoria, and our team put that together. I was back at Vic Roads. And then there's been sort of different evolutions of this. I still think that this is just scratching the surface of documentation and guidance we can provide. But it's certainly something that you should have a look at, and it provides some info and intel. Well, there's a bit of a tricky Wally there. I'm going to help you out. I've lost my pen just in case you're counting your Wallies. A little bit of a Wally there. That you're watching this on your.
Ken, we've got a comment from Duncan again, just saying, FYI, that's him on the cover of the guide.
This one? It's got to be that one, the New South Wales, I imagine, because that's Rob Smith. I assume that's Duncan. There you go. Sight, surface, signs, strike, speed. These are just the 5 S's I like to use when I'm auditing to think about riders. Can the rider be seen? And can the rider see what's coming up? How's the surface for the rider? Are there appropriate warning signs, information signs? What is the rider going to hit when they're off the bike? S, the strike. I had to make it an S, so it's a strike. And speed. What's the travel speed of the rider? What's the travel speed of the cars that may hit the rider? And when you look at those things into our risk portfolio, first one to type in what the definition of risk is. Risk is something times something. Nick has had a win. Likelihood times consequence. So likelihood times consequence, or probability times consequence, or probability times severity. I asked that in the first module. Hey, well, I'm glad you're listening, Nick. That's worthy of a prize for being able to repeat what came out of the first module. I think
so.
And it's a pretty important thing to understand for your risk rating in your road safety audit, isn't it? Because we don't want you to just arbitrarily grab a risk rating. We want you to go, what's the likelihood? What's the severity? What's the probability? What's the consequence? Use your matrix on that point. When we come back to riders and we go, okay, well, we've got sight, surface, signs, strike and speed. The sight, the surface, and the signs are all about trying to stop the crash happening in the first place. The chance of the crash, the probability of the crash. The strike is all about the consequence. This crash is happening. How bad is it going to be? Are they going to abruptly stop? Are they going to slide along something? Is it sharp? What's the issue? Speed's magic. Speed is magic in road safety all around, because less chance that the crash will happen and not as bad when it does, if it's lower speeds. So I will just touch on these quite briefly because I want to leave enough time to talk you through your audit requirement, but I'm going to go through these. Sight. Okay, motorcyclists are smaller than cars, even small cars. Motorcyclists are smaller than them. Interestingly, usually eye height's a little higher than most cars. It doesn't play out too much in audits, but it's an interesting thing to note. Interesting, we've got these safety margins that we allow for when we're thinking about motorcyclists. Why would we have these safety margins? Somebody pop that in. Duncan, you don't get a prize for popping these answers in for this one because you spend too much of your life thinking about this stuff. So any ideas why we've got these safety margins on the sides of the on the bike? Okay, so that's a good guess that came in there. Every rider rides differently and wind impacts possibly as well, so it could be different lines. It's not actually the reason it's there, but I like it. The one that's coming from Duncan, I am going to ignore because it's correct, but it's not, or it's the reason it's there, but Duncan doesn't get a prize. Lean angle, which Nick has popped in, is correct. So as a rider takes a curve, there's a lean, and we add a safety margin for that lean allowance. But the rider is smaller. Okay, and that means the rider is more susceptible to sightline impediments, small sightline impediments. So things like signs, you can see half this rider is covered by this little tiny sign. Poles, shrubs, signal controller boxes, probably all things that you wouldn't necessarily call a sightline impediment because you probably, if you're thinking about cars or trucks, but is enough to block a sightline to a rider. It's also the same with dynamic visual obstruction. So when you're looking at a design of an intersection, they're proposing something new, you've got to be trying to think about, okay, where a car's going to prop, and is that going to block sight lines to another vehicle, a rider? And, the riders can be hidden quite quickly. I'm sure you can see that one. There you go, the high vis standing out quite nicely there. But, so we've got to just try to factor a little bit of this into our thinking. Sight ahead for a rider is so important to understand what's coming up to be able to navigate. The importance of warning signs like this, being able to, if the riders can't see, is huge. So that rider now knows what's coming up and can be well informed by that. This is a sign. It's an interesting sign that is specifically warning of a particular type of curve, and it's a curve that tightens on itself. So, it's got one radius here, and then it's got a second radius in here, and the tightening of it is a real challenge for a motorcycle rider because they're likely to set themselves a line and a speed based on what they're seeing coming in here. Sure, they'll take a little bit of clue and guidance from any advisory speed signs and the like, but they're very heavily influenced by that. And if it tightens up on them, really they have almost no chance but to go onto the other side of the road if they are sort of set in how they're going. Now, I will give a prize for the person who can tell me the official term for that type of curve. Actually, Chris has come through with the goods. Compound curve. It is a compound curve. Nick's called it a spiral, which is a more colloquial term for it, as would be a double radius curve. But a compound curve is the one. So Chris, good stuff. Chris is probably a road designer. Maybe I forget. I have to reread your profile. But compound curves highly dangerous for motorcyclists, and I don't need to sort of go too far to show you an example here, but here's a 252 radius curve. So those who aren't really familiar, we measured how sharp a curve is by a thing called the radius, because basically you go, we draw a circle and then radius. That's, that's how you work it out. So a radius 252 meters, then tightens into a 117 in the curve. And actually on this one, there were 4 motorcycle run-off road crashes at this location. Tightening and unsealed bell mouth. So gravel, a bit of gravel on the road. Everything's gone bad there, and it's actually playing out in crashes with motorcyclists. So when you're doing an audit, you can be looking for your compound curves. And that's the real advantage of like taking someone like Duncan out and he's on the bike and talking to you through a microphone or recording it all, because gee, the riders can tell when a curve tightens up on them. They'll tell you very much. I should mention I'm a licensed rider, but I'm not an active rider. It scares me a little bit too much these days. Now, here we go. We've got a bank of cars back here, and they're sort of banked up here. And we've got vehicle 1 turning in, and we've got vehicle 2 coming straight through. Which one do you think, 1 or 2, pop it into the chat, is more often than not the motorcyclist? It could be either, but more often than not in the crashes we see, motorcyclists are appearing overrepresented as one of these. Road user 1 or 2? Oh, good. We're getting lots of 2s there have come in. Absolutely.
Lots of 2s.
Yeah. And people are right. And the reason for that is that the motorcyclist is smaller, is hidden behind these vehicles. And so the car's got to gear, and maybe this car driver's being nice and waving them on through. But yes, a car could be coming up here as well and get struck, and that's a common crash type. But motorcyclists just easier hidden. And so that's quite a common crash scenario. And here's actually that one from ground level. And you can see the truck here very much blocking the sight lines, and the Pajero there doing the turn in front of possibly a motorcyclist rider shooting up there. Now, the question I've got for you is, what can we do about that? Okay, you're an auditor, you've identified this as an issue. What are we going to do about it? Any ideas? Pop things into the chat. And, bear in mind that I'm a road authority. Maybe I don't have a huge amount of money to spend. Okay, we've got one idea that's come in. Any other ideas?
A few more are coming in.
Yeah, no, this is good. This is good. Okay, we've got a few ideas. So we've got some people who are interested in altering the island sizes and playing around with those. One that's come in, I'm going to give a prize here to Timothy Jones, which I think is a nice little unique one. What about staggering the keep clear sign there and there? Try and open up the sight lines a bit more, so we have the vehicles back here. Or I suppose potentially if you just bring the whole line back a little bit. This is like, I don't know why I use this example. It's like the world's biggest keep clear. Usually keep clears are just that section. But opening up that bit of sight lines, a bit more sight line for the driver, a bit more time for the rider to react, to avoid, to slow down. Signage, warning signs. You could even do things to slow down this area. You could link signals. So you could actually put a set of signals here, even drop-off signals. So just a red and an orange, that once the queues bank up, this goes red and you can't actually do that. So they can clear the traffic through. Lots of little options there. How am I going on time? Okay. So riders, as we said, hidden behind different smaller things there. You can probably see the rider just there. It is. Yep, there's the motorcyclist popping out from behind the tree. And the thing is that a rider may just have a very quick glance and go, oh, okay, I can put the foot down now before there's traffic. Well, the rider's out there ahead of the stream. So thinking about those sight lines. So the surface, surface is an important one, and we do call motorcyclists the canary in the coal mine when it comes to surface issues. The first ones to be killed or seriously injured when surfaces go bad. And Duncan rightly pointed out the lean, the center of gravity, the small contact patches, and so if the rider slips out or there's a surface issue, they could slip out, and so it's quite an issue. So especially where riders are on a lean or in their braking zone, it's really important to ensure that ensure that we've warned or we've fixed the surface issue. Here's a diagram I have to replace because Duncan rightly scolded me for the lines that we've drawn for the motorcyclists. But the principle being that through the curve and on the approach are important areas for, like the most important areas for surface. And then as the rider comes out of it, still important, but less important when the rider's on an upright and unlikely to do some braking maneuvers. So nice, consistent, good skid-resistant surface like this, which is like all roads in Australia and New Zealand. Am I right? No, unfortunately we're not. Well, we have depressions in the road, so we usually measure those under a straight edge, 2 meter straight edge, and you measure how much of a dip is in different parts of the road there. And that's, as a rider's coming around a curve, if they hit that, it'll destabilize the rider and they lose traction and those sorts of things. Obviously, potholes and things are bad. Any sort of pavement changes or deformation, especially around curves. Gravel, debris from work sites. So if you're doing a construction site audit, you want to be thinking of, have they swept the site? Have they got wheel washers, so mud and debris is not coming out onto the road, and a rider, could slip. Cyclists are very susceptible to this as well. And thinking about how we do patching and where seams are in the surface. So we often see patching where we get the seam of the patch right in the riding line of the rider, and sometimes it'll break up around that. So it's it'll be quite a challenge. This is a sort of classic example on a very popular motorcycle route up in the Yarra Ranges. Quite a curve, and there's sightline impediments, and a rider coming around here is sort of fairly locked into their line, and they see this, and really the option to go inside this is not there. Physics does not allow. So option is either to go outside it, potentially onto the wrong side of the road, or pull the bike upright, which is going to mean that the line then starts to take them onto the wrong side of the road. So ideally we get these right in the first place, but if not, the warning of something like this is so critical. A warn, hazard ahead, and all that. Duncan, remind me, is this you as well? Pretty sure it is. The surf, yes, it is. So big steel plates, obviously, get a bit wet, are slippery. Now you may say, Duncan's riding there, he can see that from a mile off, he's going to be okay. But what if it was at night? What if Duncan was following behind a car? Maybe there's a bit of fog on the visor. Then we're into a scenario where he may sort of hit that unexpectedly and then like that, off the bike. So we can provide these skid-resistant surfaces. We can colour them up. Ideally, we don't have these in the road. And you can actually influence that from the design stage. So if you're identifying pits or services in the carriageway, maybe they're building a new roundabout. This is a classic. They'll put that they go, oh, we're moving the services to, let's just put the pit in the middle of the carriageway, right? Well, that's going to cause trouble at some point. Move your services out, and we don't have this issue. There you go, roundabout and service right in the middle of it. Not a great spot at all. Skid resistant surfaces, so we can water blast. We can get better skid resistance through water blasting or different ways to do that. And it's just going to make the likelihood of crashes less for riders because they can react, they can brake, as can cars as well. And you want to try and do that really good skid resistant surfaces in the areas of highest risk. The approach to the intersection, through the intersection where a rider will need to take evasive action or maybe slam on the brakes really hard. But once they're sort of out, the risk goes down. And barriers. No, actually, I'm not going to go to barriers yet. I'm going to go to unsealed shoulders or sealed shoulders. Sealing all the way up to barriers is a really good thing. The more sealed area we have as a run out area for a rider, the better. If they hit gravel, they're kind of pulling the bike upright and crashing. But if they've got a bit more, they can sort of take that as a little bit of sort of buffered area. Curbing, the more mountable the curbing, the better for a rider. So a fully mountable curb is best. Barrier curbs will destabilize a rider. So that, you know, we've got mountable, semi-mountable, barrier curbs, as are different curbing types. If you can, obviously your drainage requirements sometimes dictate the barrier type, the curb type that you need. You might need a barrier curb for drainage purposes and the like, but be aware of that. It is good to try to make it stand out from the road around it if you possibly can. And just to sort of highlight how small a lip can destabilize a rider, I'll play this little video now. Actually, sorry, I'm going to mute it because apart from the fact that it's really loud, it also has some colourful language. So here we go. Motorcyclists coming up, and there you go, a small lip, and you can see that destabilizes the rider. They're off the road quickly, and they collide there with, well, if somebody can tell me what they collided with, I'll give them a prize too. I'm on a prize giving spree. There you go. Small lip, clip the lip, and crash results. That one wasn't Duncan, by the way. So Karen's saying it sort of looks like a bollard of some description. So Sam's, it is sort of a bollard, but Sam's going to get the prize because it's a cyclist rest bar or a grab bar. And it's basically where you have a cycling path crossing a road. You provide something so the cyclist doesn't need to unclip. And okay, so some commentary around the roundabout design, which is interesting.
There is a question, Ken, just is it the fault of the lip or the cyclist though?
Well,
because the curve is consistent with the roundabout design. So there's a second part to it.
So that's a very good question. So I actually think that as a road safety auditor, I'm pretty happy with what has been done here from an infrastructure perspective. The lip's there, it's well defined, it's clear, and actually here the roundabouts slow vehicles down. It's actually a pretty safe scenario. I really only show it for a couple of reasons. One being to show how small a lip can destabilize a rider, maybe for you to think about in other scenarios. And the second one is to talk about some of the things we put in the roadside, like this grab rail, that that stops that motorcycle pretty well. If the motorcyclist was off the bike and hit that, that would be strong enough to easily kill the rider. But a car will that'll frange on a car easily, as in break away. So thanks for the comment. Duncan saying it looks like the rider's boot clipped the roundabout. That's interesting. So they make the foot peg or the boot. I showed that as I was running some training in New Zealand at one point, and they went, "Hey, bro, come and look at our grab rails. We make them out of PVC piping." And I apologise for my accent to our New Zealand friends who are on this course, but I thought that's fascinating. The breakaway of a motorcyclist hits it. You're probably right. Very innovative. Not sure how it's going to go with UV light and things, but hey, why not? Let's innovate. Big sways of thermoplastic line marking are just not good. Like, we don't need that in the road environment. There's better ways to do it, and it will become slippery. The line manufacturers and the line markers and salespeople of line marking will say, "Oh no, skid resistance of thermoplastic line marking is really good. It's great. It's the same as the surface around it. No, you shouldn't worry at all." And they're right when it first gets applied, but give it 6 months of vehicles going over it and polishing it up, and then it becomes quite slippery. So be aware of that sort of stuff. And one thing I think, if you get into road safety auditing and you're auditing lots of designs, it won't be long before a design comes across your desk and you and your team look at it and they're planning to paint something massive on the road right in a very dangerous spot for a motorcyclist. And it's probably on the approach to an intersection where they're trying to encourage people to stop at the intersection. So they're painting a big stop sign or a big give way sign. That's their plan. And you're like, okay, see what you're doing. They've got the best intention, but that's right at the point that the rider is going to need to brake, and possibly, if they've misjudged the intersection as well, the most critical point. So they'll be hitting the brakes and slide straight out into the intersection. So we need to think about, that's a real classic that probably works fine for cars and trucks, but just is a bad thing for motorcycles. We do have these specific signs to highlight issues that are specific to motorcyclists. They're very effective. Some evaluation on these have shown when you put these up and you warn a motorcyclist of a specific hazard that's coming up, they're very attuned to it. If you sort of just put these generic warning signs that say, high risk motorcycle route next 50 kilometres, they're not effective. So there's a good New Zealand study on that to show really not effective. The motorcyclists actually know that that's high risk. They're fully aware of that. But when it's a specific issue, that's when it's better. So this bit probably is not that valuable. It's my pen again. This bit probably not that valuable, but this one really good. Coming up to a specific rough surface, loose stones, another very good one. You're probably thinking, what? Why not just remove the loose stones? It's probably like a side road or a mine site or something that's continually washing loose stones onto the road. But general good signage is really helpful for motorcycles. And you've got to think about things at night as well. So, the aftercare of roadworks is a big one, in my opinion, for not thinking about motorcyclists. They'll have, a sealed road drops into unsealed with a big drop with a lip or something like that. And it's probably okay for cars. Cars will go, oh, that was a surprise, but it can be enough to, a motorcyclist to be off the bike. And as John's rightly pointing out, gives something specific to look at, to look for, to be aware of, and that's really helpful to a rider. let's just do a little quiz to break things up, and then I'll just finish it off with strike hazards and speed, and then I'll tell you what you're going to have to do. And I'll have to move a little bit quicker probably. So, well, there you go. Emma's got it up and running beautifully quickly. Which of the following is not considered a motorcyclist, not a consideration for motorcyclist safety and road safety audits? Sight, speed, sign, sound. Which type of curbing is safest for motorcyclists? Barrier, semi-mountable or mountable? Let's go. Get your votes in quick. Remember, you're not being marked. So let's go. Fastest finger first. I'll give you 10 more seconds. Few people having a random guess at the end. And we got everybody. Okay. Emma, you can display that one. Which of the following is not considered not a consideration for motorcycle safety? So sound, yeah, that's right. Now motorcyclists can make a lot of sound, but that's not our issue in a road safety audit. Which of the following curb type? And the more mountable the curbing, the better. So mountable curbing, well done. All right, let's get rid of that and let's keep ticking on. Strike. Back a long time ago, I got a graduate to run me lots and lots, get me lots and lots of data on motorcycle crashes on curves and tell me where they're going and how it all plays out. Now, it's probably not an actual surprise, but the majority go to the outside of the curve or crashing on the outside of the curve. That's actually not the same for cars. Cars are almost a 50-50 outside to inside of curve, and the overcorrection luxury is there, because if a car's coming around, they get drifted out too fast and they'll try and get themselves back on the road. They sometimes overcorrect and go to the inside of the curve. Motorcyclists don't have that real overcorrection ability. There must be a little bit of something going on there, but outside of curve. So you're really honing in on the outside of curve. So here's a bit of the Coromandel Loop in New Zealand, really super popular motorcycle area. We've got some surface issues and we've got these hazards on the outside of the curve, and they're concrete blocks. I think it'll be bad for everybody, but you know, that's not a great spot and not a great treatment on the outside of the curve. Every one of these galvanized steel poles is a strike hazard for a motorcyclist. And I'll tell you now, strong enough to kill a motorcyclist. If a motorcyclist is sliding and they hit that galvanized steel pole, that is strong enough to kill them. We call them frangible. We call them breakaway in the industry, don't we? That's for cars. So you're going to have to think about this. And so here's a scenario, very newly built bit of road, fairly popular motorcycle area. And, you know, okay, you've got a car coming up here and, oh, gee, this board's probably, you know, about eye height. So we might have some sightline blocking. So question that straight off the bat. But, you know, they shoot out here and they've missed the motorcyclist that was coming up, and the motorcyclist goes to avoid and runs into the side of that sign. The side of a metal sign is pretty much a knife edge. So there we go. We've sliced the rider straight off the bat. And we've got the posts there to provide that really harsh impact. So you can see there's some big challenges. Now, just to keep things moving along, could we have consolidated these two signs maybe into one, lessen the amount in the middle? Yeah, could we have removed that from the start? Or could we even possibly use a more flexible sign setup there? And there are some available. They're only really good for these low mount signs. The wind loads on higher signs are a bit high. We've got a design coming along shortly, which caters for higher signs as well. But for now, you can get these rubber style low mount signs that are flexible and will bounce back up. And you can sometimes see them on keep left signs and the like. Think about your placement of road furniture. A rider is on a lean as they go around the curve, so you don't want to go too close. That, in my mind, will be taken out by a truck before it will a motorcyclist, or a motorcyclist hit it, but nonetheless. Here's a staged picture of a motorcyclist, leaning around a bit of a corner. And of course, we use barriers to protect road users from strike hazards, and barriers are very specifically designed for cars and sometimes trucks, not for motorcycles. And I'll summarise like 10 years worth of research out of the University of New South Wales from Raf Javieta and Mike Bambach on motorcyclists and barriers. There is a lot of research into this, but about half the riders are off the bike sliding and they hit the bottom. The other half are trying to stay on the bike and they hit the barrier and they go over the top really quick. Motorcyclists aren't running along the barrier like a vehicle would. So what can we do about that? Well, certainly for the bottom, for a W-beam system, we can provide underrun protection. Now, the public domain version of it is called rub rail, but there's lots of other proprietary ones. But it's basically something that you could be sliding along as a rider. So if you were off your bike as a rider, or Duncan or John are off their bike and something's happened and they're sliding along at 70 kilometers an hour, they would not want to hit this. Now, they wouldn't want to hit this either, but it's going to be much friendlier. So they will hit and slide along. So you can retrofit underrun protection to most W-beam systems. There's a bit retrofitting as we go. And there's a European crash test for motorcycle. And this will give you an indication of the forces that motorcycle riders are subject to. So here's your crash test dummy kitted up with motorcycle gear. You fire it at 60 kilometers an hour, sliding into the post is test one. And there you go. You can see with the underrun protection, there's some energy absorption, deflection of energy, and it's much less severe for the rider. So that passes at 60 kilometers an hour. There's that bit of deflection, which is important, and the redirection of energy.
I've just had a comment, Ken, around, so I've just lost my place, that someone's just made of, we've had to make a provision re-rub rails and wildlife being caught at night, the rub rail when trying to cross the road. So perhaps a provision consideration for wildlife in the area.
Yeah, good point. Good question. Certainly we had to cut some little wombat holes, wombat entry points on the Great Ocean Road when we were putting them in for exactly that reason. The wombats were crossing and then just wandering up and down the barrier. So they're the main ones that have trouble. The kangaroos and stuff just jump over the barrier then, not a worry. So good point, thank you. Oh, this one just quickly, and I'm probably going to have to end this very shortly. Why have we not put underrun protection up all the way to the end? Why did we stop it there? Chris has got that one as well, and it is the Great Terminal, as Archimore has got it in as well. So that's a gating redirective energy absorbing terminal. That is specifically designed, and it's quite intricate as to how it works. And nobody has tested and designed anything with a connection under it like that of steel connected to the posts. So you can't put underrun protection on a Great Terminal connecting to it. if you as an auditor see that, that's going to be a risk for other road users, because if they hit that, it may not function and it may spear them, or they may not get the, it may not come out the way it should. Wire rope safety barriers. So often the big, thing people say, oh, what about wire rope barriers for motorcyclists, and, the cheese cutter, and the research and evidence say that, motorcyclists hit the post, or they hit the barrier and they go over the top, just the same as other barriers. The one sort of bit of that I'm sympathetic towards is that we really haven't come up with a great protection device for wire rope systems for motorcyclists. But then again, they're not used on motorcycle routes, touring routes, for example, with windy areas, because you can't put a wire rope system on a very tight radius curve. 200 radius curve is your absolute minimum, because if the curve's like that, you're looking down on it, and that's wire rope, and you tension it up, which you tension these, you're going to pop the damn thing into the middle of the road. And you see that. If you actually put a wire rope on a 200 radius curve and you tension it up, the posts start to bend. They want to go. So we don't do it. And so it's on long straights, which is a very low risk for motorcycles. But in some scenarios, if you're basically at the point where you're saying, I want to do something about it, I recommend you change barrier type, go to a flexible WB with underarm protection. We used to use these things, which are stack cushions, cushions around the posts. They're, the equivalent of a goalpost padding for each of the things. These are not as effective. I mean, they're going to have to do something, but it's not effective. Nobody's tested them. It was more just, well, we don't have anything better. But you're trying to absorb energy. So a rider sliding along that is going to hit it. And you're trying to absorb energy over this little, right? As opposed to the underarm protection, which absorbs a bit and then redirects the energy. So that's what we want. But we can't do that because nobody's designed a wire rope system without that underarm. But here's one that went in and the auditors were concerned. It's on the South Gippsland Highway, the main route down to the Grand Prix. The auditors were concerned about motorcyclists, rightly so. One very popular motorcycle route suggested this. So post padding on every one of the central posts. At the time, $55 a unit. You can imagine the increased cost associated with that. If I was designing this today, every day of the week, it'd be back-to-back flexible WB with underarm protection. I would have changed barrier type. We didn't have that back then. Anyway, lots of examples of that. Think about the specific design. You don't want to connect your underarm directly to the post because you lose all your absorption, and there's enough room there for a leg to get through or an arm, and that's enough. If there's space, it probably will go through and be ripped off or the like. And think about that into different hazards or gaps and trying to rectify those. And we can influence rider speed in a whole variety of ways, similar to other vehicles. Chevron alignment markers, very good. Advanced warning signs, curb warning signs, and the like, all very helpful and useful. Consistency is key. No surprises for a rider through a route. And motorcycle audits are a good possible thing. And I mentioned there Duncan, who we've utilised a lot. So the rider, the experienced riders out the front, they could be a road safety auditor or don't necessarily need to be, but they're providing the commentary. This is what I feel as a rider. This is what I saw. And then the audit team sort of works with the rider. So I'm going to stop there probably. I have a bit more to talk about, but that's probably about it. But I need to show you what you have to do now. So now, Emma, do you have Moodle up and running?
I do. I'll just share my screen with everybody. There we go.
Great. Yep, we can see that.
Yep.
So in there, in Moodle, you've got your design. So you find your name and you download your design. You are auditing the design. Remember, you're auditing it as though they build it exactly as it's designed. What issues is it creating and what issues remain? Now, can you click on that audit template, the Word document at the top, please? Top of the list.
Yeah, I should. Oh, hang on. I have it. Hang on. I'll just share that option for you. I already had it open. Is it already open?
Yeah, it's on the other screen, I think, maybe. Or
that's all right. You know what I'll do? I'll just open it again.
Yep. Very good.
There we go.
And
You seeing it?
no. So I think just stop sharing and then share again and find the document and share that.
No.
So what we've done is we've given you a template road safety audit because we don't want you to have to spend lengthy amounts of time writing it from scratch. And here it is. Beautiful.
There we go. Sorry about that.
No, that's all good. And so what we've done is we've given you an audit report that conforms with the Austroads guide, the current Austroads guidance. Now, this is like, we want you to use this in your assignment, but we want you to use it going forward as well. Let's get consistency. It's for you to copy, rebrand it with your own branding if you want, do whatever you want, change, but use it because we're consistent and it covers off everything that needs to be in a road safety audit. For your assignment, anything that is highlighted in yellow, you need to update. Okay, so look for your design and then update it. So the title, there, you're all going to be doing concept design, preliminary design stage audits. You put your name in. Nobody will review it, so you can probably just review it yourself. You can delete that or put yourself. Now, keep going down a little bit, please, Emma. You write yourself a bit of an executive summary. You'll probably do that at the end. And keep going down a bit. Update your table of contents just by right-clicking and going update. Any abbreviations you've used, keep going down, please. All of that's background info. You don't need to update that. You need to put your name in there. You need to put in any information about your inspections when you went out there. You're not going to do a nighttime inspection, just a daytime. Any documents you got. Now, you want to put the document, if it's got, supplied by Safe System Solutions, or if it had a number in there, tell us what you got. If you didn't get some of this, which you won't have, you just write none. Keep going down. So your information about how to risk rate things. You're going to tell us a little bit about the audit you're doing. This is the road. This is what they're doing. This is general little bit of information. Doesn't need to be too lengthy, just a little bit of a snapshot, snip of a map of the site. And then you're into the table. All right. Now, I want 3 audit findings. If you absolutely want to do more than 3, you can go to 5, no more than 5. Minimum is 3. You don't get any more marks by doing more than 3, okay? In fact, you're just more chance of losing marks by doing more. But if you really want to do more, you can go to 5. 3 audit findings. And you write it out, you put a snip from the design if you want, you risk rate it, Safe System Energy, recommendations, categorize. You've got some example ones in there. You delete those, you write yours in. So go down a bit, please, Emma, a little bit further. So you're going to do 3 of those. And therefore the design so when it's built, these issues are going to remain, or these issues you've created. Yep, and down a little bit further. And you sign it. You always sign your audits, okay? You sign it, say that, yep, there we go, sign. And the last thing you're going to do is you're going to put a photo of yourself at the site, a selfie. So we know you actually went to the site, okay? You don't need to put lots of site photos in. You can put 1 or 2 if you want, but we really just need to see you at the site. But we've given you sort of a whole template. You could do a whole audit based off this if you wanted. When you go to your site, you have to stress the safety, right? you don't need to measure lane widths. You don't need to put your head down and look at Canberra road and these sorts of things. No, it needs to be a selfie. We need to see you in the photo, right? We can take it from a distance, or we want to see you in the photo at the site. We need you to be safe out there. Park safely. Don't be a hazard. If you wear your high-vis safety vest, you've got a safe work method statement in there that you're going to have to agree that you've had a look at. So if we go back to Moodle, I think the quiz is really just saying, are you going to be safe on site? You're not going to go out on site intoxicated and the like. So we want you to follow that. Be safe. If you have any concerns about safety at the site, when you look at it, maybe your street view, have a lolook first, and then you go, okay, I'm going to go out there, I'm going to park in this safe area. I'm going to just have a look at how it operates, how everything's go, or I'm going to have a drive through. If you've got any concerns, get in contact with us. We certainly don't want you doing anything that you believe is unsafe. Emma, can we just jump back to Moodle, please? Now, Duncan has his hand up. I think that may be a lingering hand up, is it?
Oh, yes, it is. Yep, I was just poised, ready in case you wanted to say something else. I'll just share screen.
So you got a bit of time to do this audit. I think we've given you almost 2 weeks, but so go back one. Yeah, we'll just go back a little bit, because if you go down to module 5, so there we go. You've got your safe work method statement and you've got an agreement. So I want you to read that, make sure you're following it. It just basically says, I'm not going to go out there drunk, and I'm not going to, be a hazard. I'm going to take safety into my own hands as well, and so go through that. If you have any questions about the audit, get in contact. Don't feel, we're here to help you get through this and make sure you do well. Have a look at the examples we've given you. Look back to the notes, and get out there, find some good issues, and report it up. And submission is, we have to click on it again, and on that down in 5, down to the module 5. Yep, and click on the audit. No, next one. Yep. And go down a little bit, please. There we go.
Yes.
Due date 27th. So you've got a bit of time. So what I suggest you do is get well into this before next session. And if you come to next session with questions, we can answer them live, or get in contact with me and we'll talk it through. Then you've got a little bit of time to finish it off, and you don't get your certificate until you successfully finish it off. You've got a few attempts. Okay, sorry if this has been answered. I assume we're only doing daytime audits. Correct. Daytime only, no nighttime. In a real audit, you do nighttime, but we're just keeping it contained. Daytime only. And you won't even need to spend a huge amount of time out there. It's just to get a feel for how it operates and those sort of things, and be safe. All right, we've gone over time, so I'm going to have to close it down there. Hang on. Can you please show again where I find the audit template? Sorry, internet issues. It is the top of where you found your site.
Yep.
There it is.
Just there. So when you go into the course, you go to module 5 and then complete your road safety audit site visit. And then, yeah, it's just in there. If you have any problems, certainly get in contact with me and I can talk you through it.
Okay, Lillian's saying can't find the site there. So if you can follow that up and email there, Emma, that'd be good.
Yeah, absolutely. Just shoot me an email and I will make sure that we have one for you. I mean, we'll have one. I'll make sure it's uploaded for you.
Right. Thanks, everyone. Sorry, we went a little bit over.
Yeah, and don't think, I just wanted to remind everyone, our next session is actually next Thursday. That's the last session.
Yeah, great reminder. So nothing next Tuesday. So
nothing next Tuesday. Yep. So
thanks, everyone. Thanks for
Thank
your input.
you.
Great session.
Thanks, Ken. See you.
Thanks, Emma. Bye.